Hello everyone, Jaime Gago here. Today we are going to expand one of the major points we talked about in the previous video. Better planning and color sketches. So, when we come to work on watercolor, one of the major issues we have is having a mess of a process and not knowing how we are going to proceed, leaving it to a random element, right? So bleeds happens, color change when they dry, things like that. Doing these miniature versions of the painting help you get a very sharp sight on how you are going to proceed through each layer of the painting. It's like an investment you can spend from 10 minutes to a whole day. So when you get to do the final illustration, you have no doubt. When it comes to pick a color palette, I like using Adobe Color Wheel, not sponsored. And you get to have a quite a solid color palette using that tool. You just have to translate it to your watercolor needs later. Here we are going to see how I do a color sketch for an environment painting for my comic. It's kind of study from a future background that will appear on the comic. First of all, we are going to test how the colors look over paper and how our color meats looks when they dry, and how we are going to work on each layer so we don't have bleeds on the big paper, okay? Also, something you want to try is how much contrast your paper can handle. So if you use the same paper that you are going to use for the final painting, it's going to be quite natural. Well, watercolor paper have a maximum amount of pigment that can absorb, so reach at one point it's going to be hard to get darker tones than the much darker than you already have. So once we come to work on the final illustration, we can keep consulting our color sketch. It's not going to be like copying 100%, but we know, like, okay, this part needs to be darker. This way we can avoid a lot of trouble. You have to believe me, the experience turns way more enjoyable when you put away all those random elements. One of the other things we did the color sketch for is to, as I mentioned earlier, to look how the color look when they dry. Especially sometimes when you work with watercolor, you want to use another extra elements such as wash. In this illustration I'm using a small amount of wash, white wash, to give a bit more of density to the pigments. So as you may already know, wash looks darker when it dries, so I got that cleared out on the color sketch as well, so no headache for today. One of the most important things you want to figure out on your color sketch is the light and the light source, are those kind of things. Depending on how far you want to push it, if it's for a professional illustration, you even perhaps want to do a separate light study apart from the color sketch, but most of the times you can just do both color sketch and light source study at once, and that's quite useful as well, so you don't and like ruining contrast on one of the previous stages of the painting, and then doing a whole mess trying to make it look a way more bright, your paper will thank you. You'll avoid like those kind of ugly textures you can get when you overwork watercolor paper, especially when you work on 350 or things like that. You cannot overwork those kind of papers unless you want to make a hole on them. This wasn't very difficult of a painting because it's very cartoony and most of the ambient is the same color. This is like an easy example. You can even try with one of those scenarios, like 3 color maximum, you are good to go. So obviously one of the things you cannot do on the color sketch is detailing too much, unless you want to do a very big color sketch like I showed previously. But if you are just starting, you just doing it as a hobby, it may feel like painting the same thing twice and it might end feeling a bit frustrating or a heavy task for you. So keep in mind that I just gave you the tools I personally find useful, but it's up to you to decide how far you are going to push it. In any case, feel free to reach me out if you want to know more about this, or you have any kind of question about choosing your color palette. I'm not like a super pro on color theory, but I know a couple of tricks to get the work done. Choose 2-3 color palettes to keep practicing, and later when you get used to that comfort zone, you can try your own using the tool I mentioned earlier or whatever. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope some of you find it useful, problem solving, and see you the next time. Bye! If you enjoy this kind of content, consider giving a read to my watercolor comic Arriate, link in description.